One of the biggest movies of 2023 was Godzilla Minus One, a film that came out of absolutely nowhere, at least for the Americans out here. With a budget of less than $15 million, Toho gave audiences something they wanted for years, a good Godzilla movie. People wanted to go out and see this thing, and Toho was rewarded for that by making over $100 million worldwide, with $56 million of that coming from American audiences, which is a huge step in the right direction for more foreign blockbusters getting the chance to play in American cinemas. On the other hand, one of the biggest flops of last year was pretty much anything from Disney. But it's not just Disney, okay? Because this year we already have a huge box office bomb in Argylle, a film directed by Matthew Vaughn for Apple, where the production budget alone was $200 million. And production budgets don't include the amount of money a studio spends on marketing a movie. And for a project of this size, that marketing budget could add an additional $50 to $100 million more dollars. And just in the opening weekend, Argylle made a whopping $34 million. And for those that are really new to studying box office results, it is almost impossible to make as much as your opening weekend during any other period of your theatrical run. So unless you are an Avatar sequel, Top Gun 2, or an A24 movie that launches in New York and LA, followed by hitting some smaller markets one weekend at a time, you are in the same position that 99% of films end up in. But I think the comparison of Godzilla Minus One to something like Indiana Jones 5, for example, where one cost $15 million and the other, who the fuck is working in that finance department? The marketing was easily another $100 million too, so we're talking about a $400 million plus production, and it made $384 million worldwide. And you might be thinking, well, Chase, at least it was close to breaking even. But when you consider the 40% that theaters get to take from playing the movies, this was a disaster, along with pretty much every other $200 million plus production that Disney put out in 2023. Many movie fans out there have been celebrating these losses, and although I do agree that these bombs will make the studios reconsider spending more money than Congress on another Terminator reboot, I think we are putting the entire art form in jeopardy if we don't learn from these mistakes. But at the same time, it feels like we are living in an era that is eerily similar to another that was already experienced in Hollywood history. And based off of what followed that era, Hollywood might be getting its own reboot over the next few years. But before we get to that part of the video, let's take a look at why so many of these movies are tanking in the first place. And I think to help paint that picture, we need to look at everybody's favorite thing, data. Before the pandemic, there had not been a single year since 2008 where the US domestic box office made less than a total of $10 billion. And although 2019 was another success, it was mostly dominated by Disney finales like Avengers Endgame and The Rise of Skywalker, Disney sequels like Frozen 2 and Toy Story 4, and Disney live-action remakes like Aladdin and The Lion King. And when you train audiences to only go see one kind of movie, you are setting yourself up for failure down the road for two main reasons. The first is that if you are training the audience to only pay for something they are familiar with, they will never risk paying for something new. If you aren't using a subscription like AMC A-List and plan on taking your family of four to the movies, you're looking at spending somewhere in the ballpark of $60 to $100, depending on what kind of theater you visit, along with any concessions that you pay for. And for those people, choosing to see an IP they are already familiar with is the safer choice. But the difference in 2024 versus pre-2010 is that a brand like Disney or Pixar was the thing that got people to go to the theaters, instead of the actual IP that those studios were creating. But now, those new original movies aren't getting the same support from families, when they can just wait for the Disney Plus release and spend their money on Moana 2, Zootopia 2, Frozen 3, or Toy Story 5. Strange World got zero marketing.
I think that idea translates into the world we live in today. This world we live in today is a pretty strange world too.
Encanto was very good, but it didn't gain popularity until it went to streaming. And Wish could have been a smash hit if it was at least a good movie. My second point though, which I would argue is the main reason every major Disney film besides Guardians 3 flopped last year, is that if you consistently give the audience the same kind of movie with the same kind of jokes and the same kind of CGI set piece over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, without ever giving you something new new and refreshing, every single one of those audience members will eventually feel burnt out from new movies. Even 2023, which many people consider to be a comeback year, with box office home runs like Barbie, Oppenheimer, and the Super Mario Bros. Movie, still made less money than every single year since 2001. But how is this even possible? Let me explain to you what happened with a brief story. The year was 2020.
Oh shit. Dude.
Hollywood in general was hit pretty badly by the pandemic, but a lot of that came from self-sabotage, with Warner Brothers putting movies like Godzilla vs. Kong, The Suicide Squad, and Dune on HBO Max the same day they released in theaters, along with Disney premiering Pixar films like Soul, Luca, and Turning Red on Disney Plus for free, even though each of them cost over $150 million to make. But who cares about that, right? Just throw them all on streaming where we can make no money. It also doesn't help that movies overall have just not been as good as they used to be. I know a lot of people say there's no truth to this argument, and there are obvious exceptions to that statement, but when it comes to the biggest blockbusters out there, I think it's safe to say most people are just bored by this point. Nobody cares about seeing the Marvels because we know exactly what we are going to get. Nobody cares about Argylle because it just looks bad. When you train your audience to not get excited about going to the movie theater, this crazy thing happens where nobody goes to the movie theater. Audiences have more options now than any other point in history. You can stream a new movie from home, binge a 10-episode series in a weekend, play through an epic video game, or just scroll through reels for 3 hours at a time to give you dopamine hit after dopamine hit. And it is pretty similar to the Hollywood of the 50s and 60s before the transition into the 70s. Now, there are a lot of people out there that are a lot more educated than me who can talk about every single aspect of this time in history, so I'm just here to give you the basics, okay? In the 50s, audiences were beginning to get a little tired of going to the movies. The productions were getting bigger than ever, with multiple studios putting out multiple massive blockbusters a year, but nobody really cared at that point. Television was becoming more popular, with many households picking up their first TV ever for the family. And with that came a handful of channels that gave you the option to watch anything you want from home. By the late 60s, studios were done with spending millions of dollars without any guarantee of a return on their investment, so they decided to spend way less money on productions and instead gave young, hungry filmmakers extremely small budgets, but pretty much full creative control to make whatever they wanted. This is why some of the most iconic films of all time were released in the 70s, with filmmakers like Scorsese, Coppola, and George Lucas all gaining rock star status as film directors. Audiences were exposed to so many new stories that didn't feel fake because they weren't being shot on a huge soundstage in California. They were really seeing different parts of the same world they were living in, except it was from the perspective of somebody that was really out there. And now that audiences were finally excited to go to the theater again, Hollywood was able to get their huge wins from these filmmakers and smash hits like Jaws and Star Wars. Not just because of how big those movies felt, but also because they were giving audiences something they had never experienced before. I think that is why the Barbenheimer movement is much bigger for the history of cinema than people realize. Sure, the double feature thing got a little carried away at points, but it showed that people are itching to go to the theater and experience something with an audience on the big screen. But they're not going to waste their money and time if Hollywood isn't giving them something that is worth seeing. So how do we get audiences to get excited again, while also keeping Hollywood alive long enough in the meantime? Well, I think it starts with not spending $300 million on Indiana Jones 5. I think one studio that is good to look at for this is Blumhouse.
The way studios develop is they develop the script, and when it's all done, they give it to the budget department. And they say the movie costs $100 million. We don't do that. We develop the script with the budgeting department at the same time. So the first draft of the script that we get, we read it and we give creative notes and we give budget notes. I think that movies are better if the directors have to work within financial parameters. So if we say, we love this story, but you have to figure out a way to tell it for $10 million. So when we go through many, many drafts of the script, and we're writing to two things. We're writing to make the movie better, and also to make the movie less expensive.
Sure, horror movies are cheap to make, and Blumhouse has made some pretty bad stuff over the years, but they also have some undeniable hits that come out pretty often, and some of those hits are really good. Like, who out there didn't like Megan? That was one of my favorite movies last year. It was so fun, and it only cost $12 million to make, and yet it still made over $180 million at the box office. And if you do some quick math on your calculator, you can get 25 Megan or 20 Godzilla -1 level movies at the same price of making Indiana Jones 5. I don't know about you, but I'll take that trade every single day of the damn week. All of these other studios are putting all of their bets on a grand slam, instead of just scoring points by hitting a bunch of line drives over and over and over again, without ever putting the game on the line with one big strikeout. Running a movie studio might seem crazy on paper, but I promise you that at the end of the day, all you need to do to succeed is make more money than you spend. So if you're going to make a Pirates of the Caribbean without Johnny Depp, I wouldn't spend what you did on the third one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you as always. This is my social media right here. I'm mostly active on Letterboxd, obviously, because I love talking about movies and entertainment on here, but I couldn't put all these videos out without my boy Ryan. So shout out Ryan. He edited this video. Clearly, if you made it to this point, you know he's a good editor because he kept your attention for this long. So if you need help with video editing, hit up Ryan. If you just want to hear his thoughts on movies and just life in general, you can follow him on Twitter and Letterboxd here. If you did like the video, be sure to like it for us. It really helps the algorithm a lot. It takes you like 0.2 seconds, and it helps me and Ryan out more than you know. It helps feed the family, so we appreciate any help we could get. And if you really like the opinions on here, be sure to subscribe because we got a ton of more videos like this coming out. I love talking about the industry as much as I can and how it can improve because I love movies, and I don't think we could fix the issue without calling out all of the problems that Hollywood is giving us. So hopefully they take some notes from this video. They're not, obviously, but maybe one person sees it and they're like, oh shit, that's a good point. So if you want more videos like this, be sure to subscribe, but also comment down below. What do you think about the budget issue? Do you think I'm blowing this out of proportion? Do you agree? Do you want smaller scale movies and not really care about the bigger blockbusters? I want to hear your thoughts down below. And I guess that's it. So thank you so much for watching as always, and I hope you have an awesome day. Thanks.